Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
And you're very welcome along to this week's edition of Friday Night Racing. It's Ger Gilroy and Johnny Ward with you every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock on all of the social channels across the Off the Ball network. So you can get us on offtheball.com, you can get us on Twitter, on YouTube and on Facebook as well. And then every Friday evening from 8 o'clock we broadcast on Off the Ball on News Talk. Johnny, good afternoon to you. How are you getting on?
Good afternoon, Ger. Very well, yourself?
I'm very good. Before we get to our special guest this week, and I'm really excited because it's one of the biggest guests that we've ever had on the show, there is some news coming through about a potential date for a return for racing behind closed doors in Ireland. What can you tell us? Yeah,
it's been revealed, it would seem anyway, that it's June the 8th return for racing, which will be 3 weeks ahead of the June 29th, I suppose, date that was thought to be the likely scenario for the last couple of weeks or so. Peter Burke of Fine Gael tweeted horse racing to return behind closed doors with strict protocols from June 8th. Much needed certainty for the sector. Now, obviously, this show is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Horse Racing Ireland, to the best of my mind, hasn't tweeted this officially. So we are, beholden to that. But I do understand it to be the case. And I can't understate the clarity value for the racing industry that they trainers, owners, jockeys and racecourses know that there is an end in sight to this, and now we can work towards June 8th. This is far from ideal, and we shouldn't be putting forward this as a great victory for racing, because racing has will be the guts of 2.5 months of no racing. That's a shocking challenge for racecourses, for trainers, for the industry, for the sales, for everything. And even when racing does return behind closed doors, is more a means to an end than anything else, and we're in very difficult times. So massive challenges remain for racing, but I think people will just have huge relief that we've something to look forward to, and I would include in that people who are at home and the elderly who are into racing and nothing to look forward to in terms of watching their favourite sport. Now they have, and I think we shouldn't underestimate that as well.
OK, so the end of the first week of June we expect. Now, again, this has not been confirmed by any official channels. This is certainly a bit of a solo run by a Fine Gael TD who, I'm not going to lie, I don't know that much about this particular TD up to this point. So this is his opportunity for a bit of a moment in the sunlight, and that information comes with all the caveats that it has not been stacked up just yet.
Yeah, Peter Burke, I wouldn't say I know him that well, but from my perspective, I think he has the best interests of racing at heart. And I think, some politicians in Fine Gael maybe stepped up to the plate a bit and realised that this was a very important industry. And obviously you can debate whether it should be tweeted or not before it's official, but there hasn't been any contradiction of it. And, there were a lot of rumour today as well, Ger, that racing might even be coming back as soon as Sunday week, and if not later on in May. So there was a lot of stuff, social media obviously was rife with misinformation, with speculation, with innuendo, and I just think that, it'll be interesting to get Mick's view on this as well, but just for the industry, just to have some sort of clarity that we know where we're going, because the classic programme has already been thrown up in the air. We're talking about Galway races behind closed doors. We've lost Punchestown, we've lost Fairyhouse, we've lost the start of the flat season. We were in danger of the classics being thrown asunder, so at least there's some sort of clarity, and now it's beholden on HRI to come together with a programme for racing, which I think they've been working hard behind the scenes to put together over the last couple of weeks.
OK, well, we're going to update that story as we get confirmation for you, and as soon as we do, we'll bring it to air, both here and, as I said, across all of our social channels. So just follow at Off the Ball, wherever it is that you get your social media. Now, it is time for us to introduce our guest this week, Mick Kinane. Thanks very much for joining us. First off, a privilege to have you on the show. How are you getting on?
Great, thanks, yeah.
How's lockdown been for you so far?
I'm busy. Well, I'm looking to have a farm and I have plenty of room to stretch my legs, so I've been busy. So it's been a bit like Groundhog Day, every day same. But I haven't been I'm not claustrophobic around here for sure.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps.
Yeah, okay. It definitely helps
when you're on lockdown for there to be a bit of space to walk around. Mick, I suppose the first thing we should ask you about is a bit of certainty would be great. We are definitely waiting full official confirmation that racing will be coming back behind closed doors at the start of June. I would certainly be in the camp that it's good to have that certainty, and it is, Johnny's saying it's not a victory, but it's better than the end of June. So what will certainty bring to the industry, do you think?
Well, at least you have some clarity. You know, it has been a nightmare for people involved, trainers and staff. Like since the lockdown, work has been going on as usual. Horses have to be exercised. You just can't turn it like a business. You can't close the door. You can't just turn the door and lock a horse in a box and say, all right, we'll be back in a month's time or whenever it opens. He takes a lot of care, and he has to be in constant exercise to keep him ready and to keep him fit to and ready for racing. You know, so it's been a big ask for the race fraternity and the staff, and they've all worked really hard. And at least now, hopefully, they can see there's light, and there's going to be something for everybody.
Yeah, and I can see as well that there will obviously be a programme of events to follow very quickly. So we will know, as Johnny says, what the dates for the classics are, and then trainers and jockeys can start to work back in terms of how much work needs to be done with a horse. I'm always interested in that aspect of the business. Mick, what was your involvement as a jockey with the superstar horses that you would have ridden? How involved in riding out with them? What was your own personal desire to be involved with them on a work basis before you actually got to the racetrack?
Well, each job it has different roles and different jobs, you know. So, but mostly to get a good rapport with your horse is important. To get to know him, to get to know his habits, are good and bad, or hopefully not bad, and get to learn to know the buttons to press with him, you know, because they're like human beings. They're very individual, and they take a bit of getting to know him. You just won't get them overnight, won't get it.
On that as well, Mick. So if you're dealing with we'll say a trainer like John Ox and Aidan O'Brien and these geniuses that go by feel and whatever, what's the difference between the feel that a trainer gets for a horse, we'll say, from looking at the horse day to day, to then the jockey getting on, we'll say a world-class jockey who can kind of then impart information? Is it going to be different much of the time, or are you going to be more or less on the same hymn sheet?
Oh, it's the real good ones shine like a bright light in the mornings. It's to trying to differentiate between the ordinary and classifying the lesser horses and the middle distance horses, placing them right. That's the real hard work. But the good ones, really, they're always a joy to be around. They have that presence of mind, physically and mentally, and you know, they're very unusual. They're like the really good human beings, you know, the successful human beings. They're very different. They're the leaders of the pack, you know.
Did you feel that it was beneficial in terms of, like, what's it like riding a horse you've never ridden at any stretch before? You've never ridden it in the morning, you've never ridden it in a race, and you're just going, like, you're just more or less told, well, make this up yourself. Is it a major advantage to get some sort of intuition beforehand?
Sometimes it's great to know a horse, and sometimes it's better off not knowing some of them. Some of them are not that easy handle or be good to be around. And if you've hang-ups about them, sometimes it's not best to know about them, you know. So you'll always know by your trainer, and the biggest guide of all is the lady or the girl or the lad that minds the horse. They'll tell you more going out on a first timer than most anybody. They know him best, and I was always very keen to have their insight before I went down the track. It's
very interesting to say that, like, having been at a couple of these stable staff awards, that it's a big thing for the industry or that, but the actual care that they give, like, it's more or less like looking after a brother or sister, because it's almost a 24/7 thing, and the horse probably knows them better than anyone else as well.
Oh, absolutely. They have a great reporter, like their children, you know. Like, you have to appreciate the love and care that these horses get from the staff. Like, it's a wonderful vocation, and they're not doing it for the huge money that they get. They do for the love of the animal, and you know, they're to be applauded for the early mornings and the long days and the wet days.
It sounds a little bit like you were a sponge trying to get as much information as you possibly could, but there's kind of a hierarchy of the information coming through, and that for you is the absolute nugget of the top quality information that you can get. Were you asking specific questions of whoever it was that was bringing the horse out? Was there a kind of different categories of questions that you would have had that you can get information and then go, okay, I understand exactly what that's going to be, like whether or not they're going to start quickly or whether or not they're a bit frisky, or what were you asking them?
You'll just always, how do you think of this fella? What do you think of this lady? And how does she behave? And do you write her out? And if they write them out a lot, then they're straight on it, what they think of them. And they give you a very good insight of, watch this or mind that, and could run a bit free, so be careful. So they're always very in tune to the animal you're riding.
I'm always also interested in terms of the amount of preparation that you can do for a race. We talk so much about the Mike Tyson line about everybody having a plan until they get punched in the face. It's kind of the same in terms of if a race goes off in a different way, or somebody makes a running a little bit early, or if you get boxed in, there's only so much that you can mentally prepare for the million different scenarios that there are in any race when a number of horses go to the line. What was your own routine for getting prepared in terms of the amount of information that you wanted about your opponents in the race and their form and the horse's form and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, that's paramount. That you know your jockeys. Once you're riding with them day in and day out, then you know them. You know their tendencies of what they'll do and what they won't do. Not the way you go around the world. So, and then you know your form. You have to know your form, your horses, and what they expect of pace and where horses will be positioned. And you got to do a lot of that work, well in advance of it. But then come the day, once those gates open, it's like very seldom Plan A comes into play, and sometimes you just got to make it up as it go along, because things can just happen way out of your control. You can't really watch the guy that you're following because he's too close. You got to see what's coming in his lap to react. So you have to take a lot on trust of the guy you're following at 40 mile an hour and jam very close to him. So, but you have got to be looking ahead of him to see what's happening.
Obviously, it's much easier now because you can actually watch every single race, essentially from around the world, and see every horse and kind of watch how they track through a race if you wanted to. But when you started out, the technology wasn't really there for you to watch video of all of these horses. So I guess a lot of it has to come from your ability to judge time and distance in the middle of a race.
Yeah, like even then I would do as much research as possible. You'd get, no matter where I went in the world, I would have got videos of races, the big races you were going to ride in, and just try and get an idea of what happens in those particular races, and then walk your track. But the reality, but once those gates open, it's in your hands, and I was always very lucky. No matter how nervous you were or leading up to where, once those gates opened, the loudest thing I could hear was my own thoughts. So once you're there, you're in your own zone. You're in the right place. Your concentration's in place. You're not thinking, oh, what if, or what that. You got to have enough confidence in yourself and the ability of your horse. And listen, it doesn't always work out. It can't be right all the time, but you just got to have a positive attitude and roll with the punches as they come.
When you're in the middle of a race, what is your inner monologue?
Oh, listen, listen, the most important thing of any race is a good start is a great thing to have. If you don't start well from the gates, you're always on the back foot from there. Then you're being dictated to. Ideally, you always wanted to get a good start and get into the position that was Plan A, where you want to be. And then if the pace of the race was going quicker than you're happy with, then you were farther back. So. And always know where your dangers were, and what's around you, really, and keeping a good eye on them.
And are you actually talking to yourself, like, okay, I've got him, I know where that is, like, or say for example, there must be some races where you've had a bad start and come back and won. What are you saying to yourself in that stage?
Well, what can you do? You got to get yourself parked up behind something that might take you into the race. The worst case scenario is get a bad start and you stumble in, suddenly you're surrounded by a lot of what you think are no hopers, and they can drag you back in a big field very quickly. So listen, there's sometimes desperate measures that are required. That's why you get in trouble with stewards at times. You got to find your way out. But listen, you just can't panic. You have a 500 kilo missile on you underneath you, so you have a bit of power to muscle around if he's travelling well.
Your dad was a jockey, is that right?
He was, yeah. He rode Monksfield. And actually, Monksfield probably got me started as well. I won apprentice racing at Nace on my second year as an apprentice, beating Tommy Carmody short head, and everything from that sort of got going.
Monksfield was a champion hurdle winner at Cheltenham, is that right?
Yeah, and I won a few flats on him. He was a capable flat horse, but he won 2 champion hurls. Dad won a champion hurl on him. Yeah.
When you grow up with a jockey who's winning at Cheltenham, was there ever any doubt in your mind that you were going to go on and become a jockey? Was that kind of very clear from very early on?
Well, Dad actually didn't win a champion hurl until he was late in his 40s, you know. So I was an apprentice in Liam Brown's at that time, but I always thought I was going to be a national hunt jockey because Dad was national hunt, and my brothers were all heavier and they were always pursuing national hunt. So I went into the flat just as to start on the flat, and then thought I would get heavy and become a national hunt jockey. But fortunately, I knuckled down and said light, and I'm pretty grateful for that.
I didn't realise you were in Liam Brown's as well. It seems like there's so many of the great jockeys that we speak to actually ended up being apprentices at Liam Brown's, and the reason I'm always interested in it is because he lives next door to my mum and dad now, and he drops eggs over to them all the time from the hens in his back garden, and they're the best eggs that I've ever had in my life. And he seems like such a nice man, but then I talk to all the former apprentices and they're like, well, he was pretty hard in his time too.
Times were different then, I can assure you. Now as an apprentice, you go home on the weekend on a Friday evening, and you come back on Monday morning. But in my day, if you were 2 days late after Christmas, you were told not to come back. That was about the extent of your holidays in a full year. But I wouldn't change it. He was a fantastic taskmaster. He was tough. He was tough but fair. Like Liam would, if you made a mistake, he'd on uncertain terms he'd tell you. But the one thing he might have a go at you, but you know, he turned the corner. He would never harbour anything, you know. So you moved on all the time. So, but I wouldn't change a thing. He was a fantastic taskmaster at the time and prepared a lot of young jockeys for a great career.
I'm intrigued by that, Mick, because you would have been known to be, a fairly taciturn fella throughout your career. Didn't say an awful lot, and that's the way a lot of trainers liked it. You did your job and did it in a kind of a quiet way. How much was Liam an influence? Because I know Satanta did a fantastic documentary on you a few years ago after See the Stars, and Liam was interviewed and he said, well, that was the way I was educated in terms of my own upbringing into racing. You know, it was hard, it was tough, but you came out stronger. And you seem to, did his personality kind of almost rub off a bit on you throughout your career as well?
A bit of that and a bit of Dad's. And, you would just try to learn as much you can. And unless you had something good to say, just keep your mouth shut. And that's the way we were sort of brought up at the time, and it carried me through. And you know, some people like somebody that's very talkative, but you know, people differ.
Your father was obviously well loved in the industry, and something that struck me from that documentary was the fact that he actually rode in a hurdle race the same day at Leopardstown as you rode your first winner at Leopardstown. And if his recollection of the race was right, you were 15 years of age, and it was something like a 24-runner handicap, which actually boggles the mind now if it's true. So maybe you can clarify that story.
Yeah, it was actually. It was 24, 26 runners, a mile and a half at Leopardstown. And I was drawn low on down one. And I had been riding pony racing, and not pony racing, show jumping and hunting. Because at that time, I wasn't allowed to ride pony racing because of Dad being a licensed jockey. So I didn't know a lot other than Tommy Carmody says, stick to the inside and hold him up. And I remember I held him until I got started across the road at 7 furlongs from home, and slowly started to get my arm starting to get a bit light, and he started to creep away. Ended up, I got up, went around one horse and won. And And it was just, I'd say, if you were to give me that ride again with all the experience, it wouldn't have happened. It was just sheer ignorance. And the horse ended up being a cracking sprinter. Larry Green used to train him, called Muscari. He was a 5 furlong specialist in the wind-up.
Which is insane in itself. Now, for a fairly understated fella, what was that feeling like? Because you can dream about this, but it never happens that you'd be able to do that so early on in your career. What was it like, especially, like, as you know yourself, Leopardstown, a big field, is an absolute nightmare at times. So what was that feeling like getting off? Were you kind of nonchalant about it, or were you like, oh, I might be all right at this?
I didn't know what happened, really, because I was back in school the next day. I had a test. I had a day off, and I was able to ride and race that day. And I was back and finished my tests the next day. And of course, no one had got the papers, and I had finished at lunchtime. And I thumbed my way home, which was a long way home. But then the teachers came looking for me, and I was gone. And I never went home. I never was back in school after that day.
Was that your leaving cert, or was it a junior cert or inter cert?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, my mum, God rest her, was very keen that I finish racing. I finished my education, and then I went back up for my Easter holidays, and Liam Brown convinced Mum and Dad that I should be given a chance to crack on.
That, because it almost sounded like your father, despite his background and how much he'd achieved, himself was a little bit reluctant. And did he need a little bit of cajoling from Liam for Liam to say, well, listen, this kid actually has something, you know, or was your father maybe a little bit worried, or did he think you were always going to do it anyway?
No, I'd say he hadn't a clue, but he just thought he knew how difficult it was to be successful as a jockey. As a young guy growing up, and I'd always be with him, we'd go racing, and he says, are you going to be as good as your dad? And he'd always say, unless he's 10 times better, he said he has no chance.
And the Liam Brown education, how would you describe that?
It was tough, but listen, I loved it. I wouldn't have gone back to school in a heartbeat, no matter how bad a day was going. Because you were busy, you were riding horses, which you just couldn't get enough of. And but we had long days. And I remember as my first year, I travelled 2 horses down to Tralee myself, led them both up and rode one in between, and brought them home. So that was apprentice's life in 1976.
And none of that in any way made you doubt? There was no night where you were like, oh, Jesus, I don't know if I'm going to make it here, or I don't know if I'm going to get the opportunities that I need here. Was the whole way along, did you always feel like this is my destiny, this is what I need to do?
It's just I never I can't remember not thinking I wanted to be a jockey always, all my life. So it didn't matter. Once I could get away from home and you were riding horses and the dream was there and you had a chance of making it, then I was happy. But I was lucky. I got my second year, I got going really well, and rode probably 26 or 8 winners. The second year was second in Apprentice Championship, my second and third year, and then I was champion apprentice my 4th year. And when I lost my claim, I was leading jockey at the time, so I hit the ground running pretty well. Had a few hold-ups after that with a few breaks, but you're never not going to get a fall and break something in when you ride a horse.
No, and in fairness, so these are always very interesting conversations we have with jockeys as well, particularly ones who start very well. That first setback, and in all sports, that first setback and how you deal with it, it takes a long time to deal with your first setback, I think, in any walk of life. If you lose a job, or you lose a competition, or whatever it is, you lose a race you should have won. In your case, it could have been an injury. How did you deal with that? How do you actually come back from that? And where does the resilience from that come from?
I don't know. You just don't think of it. You go a long time before when you think you're invincible, you can't get hurt, even though you break a wrist or something. You just don't think that's getting hurt. For some reason, we're just not programmed that way. It is until you get the fall where you think you could have got killed that shakes you up. And it was a long time before I got one of those that made you ever really think that you had to fight your way back and get your confidence.
And who do you talk to in a circumstance like that?
Oh, there's only one fella can help you. That's the fella looking straight back to the mirror. He's you can't hide from him. He'll tell you if you're afraid or not.
And what are those conversations like when you are kind of wondering if I'm gonna make it back to the level that I was at, or even move beyond it?
You have to face your demons. You just have to shape up and get back into action, and when that gap gets really tight, and then you'll know how your nerve is holding. And you say, all right, now I'm in there, I'm going, and then you get through it. Because luckily on the flat you'll only get them falls not too frequently, but when you get them, you'll get them, and they're often quite big. But then you could move on then for another couple of years, or at least, and not get another one. So, and then once you start riding winners, and everything is forgotten.
We're talking about bottle here, essentially, right?
Ordinary horses, and that really, and when you're in that frame of mind, that really will get your confidence, and you're getting bollocked, your things are not going right. That's the winner mentality is key to everything.
Slightly jumping ahead here, but when you did have that fall in Hong Kong, you'd probably what looked visually as bad a fall as you can have. You're riding in a dirt race, you're up the inner, and you're kind of you're looking for a bit of room, and looks like you clip heels or whatever. Basically, you get snatched up, and you were the mother and father of all falls. You were obviously very lucky to survive that physically, but did that leave any scar mentally? Because if your bottle is gone, you're finished, obviously.
Oh, it did, yeah. It took me a while to shake that one, because when you get a real haymaker or a really bad fall and you get knocked out, you can't remember it. It's great. But when you get a haymaker like that and you've never lost consciousness, that's the one. That'll check your resolve. And that did, because I was really hurt inside, mentally and physically. And it took 7 or 8 weeks for those physical stuff to be put to bed. And then it took me a couple of months to really get that mojo back again. It took a while.
And if we can kind of go back maybe a small bit from Liam Brown's, you get the job at Dermot Weld. You didn't get the job at Dermot Weld necessarily because you were the number one choice at the time, and you slightly benefited from somebody else saying that he didn't want it.
Steve called and didn't take it. Fair play to Steve. He's done me a few turns over the years. I met him actually in Riyadh in February this year, and it was great to catch up. And he was a lovely guy, and his wife Amy. But yes, Steve was offered the job first, and I was second. But I was very happy to take it as second.
Yeah. The Dermot Weld story. I think sometimes you'd nearly forget how absurd the things he achieved along with you were in pioneering all these overseas raids from Hong Kong to Flemington to the go victory in Belmont. And did you appreciate at the time how maybe ahead of his time he was, and how much of a team you were and how successful you were? Because to be winning races on dirt in America, to be going to the first horse that was actually allowed to win the race in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Million or whatever it was from abroad, and then to be the first overseas, first Northern Hemisphere winner of the Melbourne Cup, this is off the chart stuff.
Yeah, when I went to Dermot first, I was green behind the ears for DKW, but he definitely knocked the corners off me pretty quickly. But I was lucky from very early. So there's a race I want to win is the Melbourne Cup, and you usually take that as a pinch of salt because it's not an open handicap, and yeah. But he did say it a long time before succeeding it that it was a race he wanted to win, and yeah, he started all my big stuff started because of Dermot. Really, we started to go to Italy and win the Prima Perioli and the Derby, and out of there, I sort of, that connection got me Carl House, and then all sort of that time we didn't have Sunday racing here, none in England, so all the big stuff, as they call it, going on in France or in Italy or in Germany on a Sunday. So that's where I was every Sunday, and you were mixing it with your Pat Ederys and your Willie Carsons, and all the English trainers were there, and so they were seeing me for the first time rather than in England, and it's from Dermot's exploits that everything took off. We started. There was nowhere safe with Dermot. Once he could get on the plane and had the right horse for it.
There was that moment, obviously, then when Sheikh Mohammed offered you the job over there, and did Dermot, I suppose, at that particular juncture, that really important juncture, show you that he did value you maybe more so than Sheikh Mohammed seemed to value you at the time, or what was the decision there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like at the time, when they rang me, I was in Hong Kong at the time. I had stopped doing the 6 months in Hong Kong. I was doing 6 months Hong Kong, 6 months in Ireland and Europe. Initially, when they rang me, I said to the captain, I said, "You're looking at Sheikh Mohammed's next jockey." That was my initial reaction. But then when I started to scratch the surface and I rang Steve Cotton as to why somebody as capable of him didn't have the job anymore, and what they were offering me, and then Dermot and the Aga Khan got themselves together and said, "We want you to stay," and they fought harder than the other side by a long shot. And it was a no-brainer in the wind-up for me when I started to peel back the layers of the onion, where I should be. And I had so much on the go. I felt it was too much to give up, and also I didn't want to bring my family up really in England. I wanted my kids to be educated in Ireland. So that was the big decider. But Dermot and co, they fought hard. Yeah.
I think Sheikh Mohammed was a little bit taken aback.
I'd say I'd say they probably initially thought they'd get me no matter what, So and listen, I turned them down. Mace Roberts got the job, and then the following year they gave me a retainer to ride all the Group 1s over Europe for 3 years in a row. I had a better job a year later for turning it down.
The best of both worlds, really.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had a period there where it was unbelievable. Where I was riding the best horses anywhere around the world. I was able to go to England and ride all their best, and I had Dermot's here, and when Dermot didn't require me to big meetings, I was going there. So there was a period then it just doesn't get any better.
Yeah, sweet spot. I just want to remind everybody, this is Friday Night Racing, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie, or you can follow the new Twitter account at HRI Racing. We will have Brian Kavanagh, the Chief Executive of HRI, with us a little bit later on in the show, just to talk about their return to racing, which has been confirmed in the last few minutes. HRI have issued a statement that says they are one of the industries that will be allowed to return behind closed doors on June the 8th. So that news has been officially confirmed now, and we'll hear from Brian Kavanagh in just a little while. Our guest this week is the legend that is Michael Kinane. Can I just ask you, though, when did you get good? When did you realise that it wasn't just ignorance that won you that race at Leopardstown that day, that actually there was talent there? And obviously you worked very hard and you had great training and you had good opportunity, but all of the top jockeys who we've had along the way, there's a ruthlessness somewhere in them that allows them to get up and not to feel the pain of the broken wrist that you've already spoken about. When did that penny drop for you that, I am going to go here and I'm going to compete? No matter what it takes to win these races, I'm going to have to do it, and I'm going to do it.
Well, I was probably always lucky to... I had that steel determination to want to succeed. It's something you probably... It's hard to instill in someone. They're either born with it and they're lucky that if they can transfer it into something and be successful. So I never sort of took second best for... I was my own biggest critic throughout my life. So I never expected to make the same mistake twice, So I learned early on. I knew after my second or third year that I was starting to ride well, and you that comes, and confidence comes with that. And the more confident you get. Maybe you're a bit arrogant, but confidence just is a huge tool for any jockey at any time, and it's very important to have it.
Is there a selfishness involved at being at the very elite of a sport like that? And are there sacrifices you made along the way in retrospect that you were now happy that you did make those, or did they cost you at the time? Like, what's the price for being that competitive?
Oh, you have to be selfish. It just comes with that. You have to be single-minded to get past all the distractions and things that go and mistakes, getting past them. So it's just something you just have to develop, thick skin, and be able to move on, and not definitely not. You can't live in the past. You always dust yourself down and move on, and next up.
It seems relatively straightforward for you. It seemed relatively straightforward for you to be able to do that. We know of so many jockeys who struggle with that bit, where they get a bit of success, they go a bit off the rails, or they're not getting success and they go a bit off the rails. That doesn't seem to have happened to you at any stage.
I can't say that nobody's perfect. I was lucky enough to have a long sustained career, and very grateful. Listen, you without sin cast the first stone. I can't say I was 100% perfect. I wish I was, but you try not make too many mistakes, and you just stay focused. And it helps to have the back of a great family.
Just reading actually, Kieran Fallon's autobiography at the moment as well, and make it's very easy for a jockey to go off course. Is it the nature of the lifestyle, which is a pretty mad lifestyle when you think about it, that it's hard not to be tempted by things that maybe, so many jockeys get into drink and get into drugs and go off course. And if you were to, talk to a young jockey who's starting off at the Curragh today, what would you tell him or her?
Oh, choose your friends carefully. You'll be very popular if you're successful with everybody, but the minute you're not, that phone will stop. So always remember who your friends are.
It's a difficult place when that happens.
It is, but from very early on, though, when we'd stop racing from November until March, like once that 1st of November would stop, that phone would stop. If you have me tell you something, a handful would ring you. So from very early on, I realised the people that really matter to you in life, outside of your very close friends, and then your job, or the people that you're responsible for.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I was on to Pat Smullen before we came on, and I just said, how would you describe Mick Kinane as a rider? And he said the best there ever was. So obviously he's going to be flavour of the month at the moment. But when Pat obviously was forced into retirement, much of what he spoke about was Frances, his wife, Frances Crowley, and how strong she was for him. And she has been unbelievable, I think, throughout this. But you obviously had a proper family situation, because this is a tough job, and like any wife of a jockey makes huge circumstances.
Yeah, and your kids do too, but you're absent a lot. But there is no other, they don't love me any less now for being absent. So they understood. It takes them a while, but they understood that I had to do what I did. So, but it gave them plenty of satisfaction too, I would hope.
If this might be my maybe favourite part of this interview, because I got into racing around about the time Rocket Gibraltar was on the scene, so I kind of missed Galileo on Fantastic Light, probably one of the greatest races of all time anywhere in the world. But your time in Ballydoyle, from Giant's Causeway to obviously Rocket Gibraltar, Galileo, how would you sum it up? We could probably spend hours with you talking about your career here. We don't have that time, but your time with Aidan, and how do you look back on it on reflection, the horse you rode?
Sure, I rode some of the best horses of a lifetime in a period of about 6 years. It was just, there was just a phenomenal conveyor belt of super horses, really. It was just you know, when you went there of a Saturday morning to ride 2-year-olds, and you could ride. I remember one morning I rode 24, 25. But to be just one next beautiful horse after another, you know, that really went well, and they were just a conveyor belt of champions at that time. It was, I don't think there was a time anywhere that there was such a array of champions.
Did you feel with Aidan that, you know, when you think of the trainers you've ridden for, you know, definitely three of the greatest trainers that will ever train in Ireland you've ridden for, what was Aidan like, or did something set him apart from the rest?
Each of those great men are different, very different in their personalities. But Aidan's attention to detail was just unbelievable, and his focus, like he just, you know, you couldn't distract him from where he was going or what he wanted to do. So if you did, you got left behind. So he's quiet but very steely. But listen, eats, drinks, and sleeps his horses, and a great knowledge of horseflesh.
The races that would come to mind, apart from the ones I mentioned, I suppose, High Chaparral, obviously he's desperately unfortunate defeat in the Breeders' Cup when Landseer broke down in front of you. And also, one of my favourite races of all time was Joe Hare and High Chaparral dead heating in the Breeders' Cup. What was your favourite race that you rode in for Ballydoyle?
Ooh. Yo. Oh, that's a fair one. Favourite race. I suppose I got more kick out of probably Rocker Gibaldi than any horse. He was one of those push button horses. You know, he had a 100-yard turn of foot that was electric. You know, and he's the only horse. Like, he mightn't be the greatest racehorse I ever rode, but going to the start, halfway down, he'd squeal in the buck and a kick. He just loved performing. You know, he just didn't want to be anywhere else. Only he was a show off. He just wanted to perform in front of everybody. And but he was just one of those horses. Could you just sit quiet and just produce him? And that he was. And then it was a fun time with Sir Alex and everybody, when everybody was still good friends. And it was a good time had by all.
I was going to ask, were you a football fan?
Oh yes, very much so. Man United fan.
Right. So I mean, that must have been a sensational 6 months or so.
It was, yeah. You know, Sir Alex was good to me when I had my back trouble. When I forget what year it was. My back sort of started to give me trouble, and I stood down at the Curragh one day, and then it kept reoccurring. And after 10 days, I thought, I'm going to give up here. I'm going to head to Spain and just disappear for a week or 10 days. And next thing, the phone rings. And it was Sir Alex. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, I said, "I don't know what I'm doing." I said, "I'm thinking I'm going to Spain." He says, "Get in the next flight." He says, "And come over here." And I did that. I got the afternoon flight, and I went into Carrington for 3 days and got physios. But he didn't cure me, but he cured me mentally. Michael, he says, "Only you can fix this." So I came back out of it and sought help and got the right physio, and I came back in a good place. He fixed what was broken. It was the mindset. So that'll tell you the management of him. He had plenty to look after, and he didn't need a jockey run around Carrington, but he did.
And are you still friends after everything that happened, or did you get caught in the crossfire of that?
Oh yeah, no. We were made good friends. I've been to many matches, and I was over there last year. So he's a good friend, great man.
When you think about it, and Johnny laid out that these are three of the best trainers that we're ever going to see, and you've listed off those. We haven't even yet talked about the final season and See the Stars and the amazing crescendo that your career finishes on. When you're in the midst of that, you're considered the world's best jockey, and Pat Mullen is saying now, 10 years on, the best he's ever seen. What's that actually like? How aware of the respect that you're held in by your peers are you? Do you feel responsible? Do you feel emboldened by it? Is it something that you kind of you feed off, or is it a pressure? What's that actually like, being the best in the world?
It's like anybody's an opinion. You could have been if I lost a race somewhere, some fellow he would say he's the worst jockey in the world. So I said that doesn't last long with race goers. But no, it's nice to be viewed in that terms with your fellow peers. You know that you're respected, and you have to respect them as well. So it takes a while to earn that respect from the top jockeys anywhere. And when you get it, it's a nice thing to have. It's nothing to. It's just to be. It's so grateful to be able to achieve something like that.
You didn't feel it was something you had to protect, like the hierarchy and be the alpha in this situation?
No. The reality of it is, once you get to the top of the tree, there's only one place you can come and go, and that's fall off it. And so there is. When you're at the top of it and you make a mistake, then it's magnified. Of course it is. But that's just a responsibility that you have when you reach there, So it's something you have to deal with.
See the Stars story, Mick, is obviously, I suppose it was as perfect as the horse himself in that you were, hitting the guts of 50 at that stage. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. And obviously John Ox had gone through, a fairly run-of-the-mill time, but didn't have a proper horse. And then this fella comes along, and somehow the two of you managed to get him beaten first time out.
Yeah. I saw somebody tweeting down along, guys, the worst ride you ever see a horse got. So see the Stars first time out of the Curragh. But the reality of it, he was a big raw horse. We loved him. He knew he was going to have a big career, and it wasn't win at all costs. It wasn't that we weren't trying, but he was drawn in there, and the thing was to drop him in, get him in the middle of everything and teach him plenty. And the gap just didn't open. It opened late. And it was a blessing in disguise for the horse himself, which meant that he was able to go. His second start was in a maiden, and he's had the education, and then his third start was into stakes races, because it's very difficult with our program here. If a horse wins a maiden, he has to go straight into stakes company. There's very few winners races, so it can be quite hard to get a horse to progress in the right manner. So it was just one of those. I'd have to say it was a lucky break for the horse. I think that we just wasn't able to dip him on the first day, and that's all it was. And but then he just started to blossom.
What was the arc like? Because obviously that had come to the end of the 6 Group 1s in that season, and you could make a film about those 6 races alone, because so many things have been thrown at you. Tactics were different, trips were different, a mile and two. He travels to a different country. Ballydoyle tried to take him on with some other left field tactic. He answers all the questions. They say he goes to the Arc, and he's maybe slightly turned in his coat at this stage after a long season. He's far too free for much of the race. You're about 12, 15 lengths off the pace coming into the straight, and there you are sitting motionless.
Well, don't point me panicking at that stage. We were in a tight spot, but like the reality of it was that, like, it was funny. We were in the pre-parade ring, and next thing they clapped the horse into the ring, and like everybody from around the world, they turned up to see him win, not him lose. And I just said to John, I says, I hope they're clapping in 10 minutes time. But from draw 5, I was always going to sit in, and like, at some point in the straight, I was going to need an element of luck, and that's the nature of Longchamp. It's a pretty technical track. If you want to ride it safe, and from 5, you just kick out them gates and drive on, and then you just won't make it home. So there's no point worrying about what's going to happen in the straight and the back stretch until the straight happens. So we just got to sit and I knew if a gap, when it arrived, I had the horse to deal with it, and he dealt with it in spades. On the day, I remember saying Oliver Pelly was on, I forget what he was on, a striped horse. He was a very good Group 1 winner ahead of me, and he kicked for a gap ahead of him, and I looped him. I got to it before he could get to it. And Ollie, when he came in after, he says, the horse never went by him so quick in Ollie's life. And that was a compliment from one of the greatest riders around.
It was an absolutely extraordinary turn of foot when you look back on it. And this question has never actually been asked before, but it's good that you'll be able to give a definitive answer. So it's at the Curragh. It's on, we'll say it's in the middle of June. The race is run over 10 furlongs. Tom Quealy's riding Frankel. MJ Kinane is riding See the Stars. Who wins?
See the Stars.
There we go.
Well, there was never a horse that could drag him to his limit. Like Sea to Stars was never... Like Sea to Stars after the arc, Christopher Smillian kicked up around, Michael had gone asleep around the corner pulling up, and Christopher Smillian kicked up behind and went to pat me in the back, and he woke up out of his slumber and took off. He ran away with me up the backstretch to the 7 furlong gate. He thought the race wasn't over. So that will tell you what he had left. So there was no horse in that year capable of dragging him out of him. It would have taken a Frankel to drag everything he had out of. And I would have expected him.
He was potentially better than his half brother, and I suppose anything you've ridden, really.
He developed more than his brother. Like Galileo in June, if you were to ask me to ride the most perfect Derby horse, it would be Galileo. And no question, because he was so balanced. He was a tidier model than he was a beautiful, he was 16 and a half, I suppose, beautifully balanced, but he was mature earlier, a lot earlier than Sea to Stars was, and hence Sea to Stars saw the year up better because he was maturing and getting development more than Galileo did later on in the autumn.
I suppose one of my final questions is, Ruby Walsh went out on his own terms. Did you feel you were doing the same?
Yeah, listen, I knew it. I always had promised myself I would try to go out on top, and it's difficult in sport. Sport checks you out. But when like a horse like him comes along, and I was really able to motivate myself. It was very easy to motivate myself and keep myself very fit at 50 for him. But I knew at 51, and there wasn't a horse around, I probably might ended up getting on a horse. I didn't know, but I wouldn't have had the motivation to stay going. So I just felt it was the right time.
Are you still involved in racing on a day-to-day basis now? You said you've got a farm. Are there horses on the farm?
Yeah. There's some horses here, and then we have some mares. I've been breeding for a long time. I've been lucky enough to breed the Derby winner in authorised. So still searching for another one of them. And I started buying yearlings for the Hong Kong Jockey Club last year. So that was a nice new addition to something to do last year. So yeah, I'm very much still involved breeding and happy. And
are you watching all the racing obviously when it comes back? Are you glued to all these races?
Yeah, big stuff. Like I wouldn't sit in every day now and watch, but I'd have records, and I'm very much watching the breeding of every horse, and I will watch every replay of any of the big races for sure, all the time. As
a matter of interest, do you ever look back at your own races and go, geez, that was pretty good, that wasn't bad?
No. The odd time something comes up and somebody sends something on Facebook and a link or something, you might just go and say, yeah, well, that was a good day. But it's in the past. Sorry?
Mick, we're sending you to the gallows. This is your last meal, but we're going to give you a race instead to watch back from start to finish. What would it be?
I'd say probably one of the most exciting races, big races that I ever won by a whisker would have been the Japan Cup when it was the early 90s on Petsulski. That was nail-biting stuff. There was probably 5 of us within half a length or a length. Short as a short head. Was probably one of the best kicks I ever got. Well,
Mick, you've been unbelievably generous with your time today. Thanks so much. It has definitely been a life less ordinary. Congratulations on a great career, and long may it continue. Thanks a million.
Thank you, guys.
It's the legend that is Michael Kinane joining us there. We're going to speak with Brian Kavanagh in just a moment. A reminder, though, that this week our fund for the Irish Injured Jockeys Fund, the Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Fund, now stands at €1,340 after another €100 donation. You've only got another 3 weeks of these donations, Johnny, before you got to put your reputation back on the line.
Well, to be honest, I'm just hoping the racing is called off forever and I never have to tip again.
But, French racing. Yeah. French racing has obviously returned to the tote.com this week, and Saturday sees 2 flat cars taking place in the jumps meeting at Auteuil. You can find racing from France and around the world every day on the tote.com. So We do have confirmation that racing in Ireland will return on the 8th of June after the government has approved the resumption. HRI's proposal to the government for racing to resume earlier than June 29th has been successful. And Brian Kavanagh, the Chief Executive of Horse Racing Ireland, is on the line now to explain to us what that process was like and actually what happens next. Brian, I know obviously you would have perhaps liked this to have come back a little bit sooner, but given everything else that's happening in the world at the moment, maybe June 8th gives everybody a little bit of breathing space to make sure that everything is right and all that you need to be ready will be ready by then.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's good news, and certainly a lot better than June 29th. And of course, racing and the industry behind it is a wheel that never stops spinning, and there's always something turning on it. And that's the problem, that when everything shut down on the track from COVID, the industry behind it ground to a halt, and that led to a lot of difficulties for people. So this is not a case of people wanting to resume something because they enjoy playing it or whatever. It's resuming because there's a large industry and activity going on behind it, which depends on what goes on the track. So it's good news. As I said, racing has resumed in France and Germany in the last 2 weeks, and will resume in Britain on the 1st of June. So the 8th of June, we'll see racing resume here, which is great.
Obviously, you did have the opportunity to run 10 meetings behind closed doors, so you got a bit of information gathering from those 10 meetings about what it was going to be like. And since then, there's been, I presume, plenty of work going on to make sure that everything that you learned from those lessons are refined, and then what comes next will actually be a slightly different product, I suspect.
Yeah, we learned a lot from the 10 meetings. They were good. The people took to them very, very quickly, and that's an important point. People in racing are used to rules, regulations. They're used to being regulated. They're used to biosecurity. They do it every day in their stables at home. So they took to that quite well, and the arrangements got better as each meeting went on. Since then, we've strengthened those protocols. I think at that time there were 25 to 30 pages. Now they're over 60, almost 70 pages. We've liaised with our international counterparts. We've taken on board, the HSE advice, the Department of the Taoiseach advice, and they're a living document. So there's a strong set of protocols there, and I think I said to you before that, they're very sad places. A racecourse with no public, no bookies, no restaurants, nothing. But they're actually very well suited to social distancing. These are outdoor spaces, outdoor, a lot of space, and a lot of empty rooms now that the public are not there, which you can use to space people out there. So, what we call them race meetings, they're not racing as we would know it. These are really trials for what's going on the track, to determine the best horses in various categories, which is what allows the industry behind it to keep moving, and we'll keep the minimum amount of people, in attendance that are needed. So yeah, the experience is good, and the learnings from our international colleagues is very helpful as well.
Okay, I understand.
Go
on, sorry, Johnny.
The thing that should be mentioned, Brian, it's a little bit like Michael Collins going over and bringing back the treaty. It wasn't exactly everything that we were looking for, but it was something like that, because this is still a situation that's far from ideal. What can you explain about the actual protocols and the limitations for owners, and what will the race courses have to deal with going forward from the 8th?
There'll be no owners at the races. The objective is to have the minimum amount of people on site as is necessary, to minimise the risk. There'll be strict measures for people attending the race meeting. You'll have to complete health questionnaires the day before, and will have to be authorised to attend by the IHRB doctor. On arrival, you'll be screened for body temperature. Anyone with an elevated temperature won't be allowed in. And then within the racecourse itself, there will be, significant measures with regard to social distancing, hand washing, spacing out in areas of weigh room, parade ring. Many of the people on track will be required to wear masks, gloves, all the normal precautions that were required to undertake. But as I said, it's funny when you strip back the attendance side of it. And the number of people that are normally serving in attendance at a race course, the number of people that you need the horses, you need the riders, you need people to lead them up, and you need the officials, some medical personnel and a film crew, and you're largely away at that stage,
And is there a program in place now that Jumps fraternity know what's going on, and obviously the flat fraternity know in terms of the classic program and all that? Has HRI a program in place now?
Yeah, we've had a number of different programs for various resumption scenarios. So we'll publish that on Sunday. We have a board meeting tomorrow to sign off on the details. So we'll publish the program initially up to the end of June on Sunday, and various other details. The key today was to get a decision and some certainty or clarity around a resumption.
Yeah, and I suppose just as well as that, what about overseas runners from or to Ireland?
Talking to our international counterparts on that's and it's lovely to be dealing with those sort of problems and those sort of issues. That's completely dependent on the government policy in each country. France and Germany have no overseas runners until the end of May. I understand the British will have only overseas runners in Group 1 races or Group 2 races to start with. We need to look at that. That's a detail that, as I said, we'd welcome looking at the moment. But obviously, the horses are not the issue here. It's the people that might be with the horses and the requirement for those people to comply with the government guidelines in relation to people visiting the country. So anything that's done, if anything is done at all, will be entirely in accordance with the government requirements in relation to people coming from overseas.
So just to summarise, you do expect there to be a programme published on Sunday which will outline...
Yeah. We've lost 11 weeks racing, Ger, and the intention will be to make up those lost opportunities throughout the rest of the year, not just in the first month. But obviously the fixture list has been torn up for the months of April and May, and indeed June now with this. So we will publish a revised fixture list for June, and then over the course of the rest of the year we will look to to see what changes need to be made to the remainder of the fixture list to make up for the meetings that have been lost.
Okay, so we might see some of the big races that we've already lost this year back on the calendar for September, October.
Yeah, or sooner than that. I mean, you will, but as I said, that needs to be signed off by the board tomorrow. But we will endeavour to replace as many lost opportunities as possible. And as I said, that's more to do with its importance for the breeding industry, its importance for the sales, the trade industry. Ireland is the leading trading nation, the leading exporter of horses in the world of any country, and that's all determined by what's going on the track. So when racing is taking place, buyers internationally around the world are looking at the races with a view to buying them. You see in Hong Kong, which has kept going racing during their lockdown. Every week you watch racing from there. There's a large number of ex-Irish trained horses that have been sold to race out there.
Yeah.
So we publish that on Sunday, Ger.
Okay, there's always this is Ireland. There's always a backlash whenever something happens. So I guess the case you're making here is that a massive industry is utterly reliant on these races taking place. And the other side of this, I suspect, is that you would have wanted to come back sooner, but actually having this lag in time will allow the rest of the country to see exactly how people are dealing with lockdown and how well we're all adhering to the new regulations. Yeah,
I think that's right. We've said all along, that we would resume racing when it was safe and appropriate to do so, as deemed by the government, and that as of today, that's June the 8th. It's a national effort in fighting this pandemic. This is different, as I said, to other sports. There's live, living animals, that need to be looked after, need to be fed, need to be exercised, need their welfare looked after. And the purpose of having those animals is to race them at the end of it. And cyclically, that is important for the breeding industry. So, without getting too technical, certain types of horses are bred for certain types of races. So people might breed a an early 2-year-old, as they describe it. That's a 2-year-old horse who runs over short distances. Those races can only take place in the early months of the horse's 2-year-old career, from March to June. That part of the season is lost, which means anyone selling those horses at various sales, the value of the stock is disappearing in front of their eyes, and the potential to sell it or export it to buyers in the UK or America or France or Australia is lost. So as I said, it's not a case of people want to resume racing because they enjoy participating in the racing or because people want to go to the track. That won't be happening for a long time. It's to keep the wheels of an important industry moving.
All right, Brian Kavanagh, HRI CEO, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks, Ger.
It's Brian Kavanagh, the Chief Executive of HRI. Johnny, I know you're saying that you wanted it to come back a little bit earlier and that this isn't good news, but I suspect that the certainty and the clarity that is coming off the back of this is actually, from an outsider perspective, really good news. We lose Johnny there. You're gone on mute there, Johnny.
Sorry, Ger. If somebody said today it's June 29th, okay, that's clarity at the very least. There hasn't been a great deal of clarity the last while because quite clearly there has been some work going on behind the scenes to try to get the date brought forward a bit. I think racing's date was May the 18th, which is what, 3 days away. I had no problem with that whatsoever. And when you hear the hoops that everyone has to go through just to get to the race, and these are people trying to do their bit of work. I mean, in fairness, racing is going out of its way here to make sure that this is done as safely as possible, and it's just fantastic for the industry. It's been a nightmare for trainers not knowing what to do with horses. If you can take horses out of a field for 1 month, that's an awful lot of income lost, and then you have to send them back to training, but you're like, well, should I send them back to the field because I don't know when the date of return is. So it gives finality, and it gives a lift to the industry as well. It gives a lift to an awful lot of people that, we've something to look forward to. I think lockdown has been really, really hard on a lot of people, a lot of young people, a lot of elderly people, and those of us who like sport. There are only so many games from 1974 we can watch, and I think this is just an encouraging day for racing that we can move forward. And we are still we're comfortably behind France and Germany. We'll probably be behind the UK in returning as well. So it's not like this is special treatment or anything. Racing's an industry and it needs to keep moving. And I can't wait to see racing again, to be honest.
Yeah, and also the calendar of events that they're going to have is going to be fairly spectacular, and we will definitely have lots to talk about over the course of a long, hot summer, especially if racing is one of the few sports that actually gets away. There's an opportunity to bring on board a lot of new fans.
This is the thing. I mean, it's the League of Ireland is obviously mired in its own debate at the moment. But one thing that both of these sports have is that there's going to be very little football on across the world if the League of Ireland returns. The League of Ireland won't have rugby or Gaelic games to worry about for the foreseeable, and racing's going to be back before that as almost the only show in town. So why not watch a race meeting or two? Because there's very little else on. And if you could have the likes of Mick Kinane riding in a race, and if you have a similar story to a 15-year-old riding his first winner in a 24-runner handicap in a sprinter over a mile and a half, you might think, actually, this sport has something going for it. Yeah,
buy shares in Friday Night Racing. That's my advice to everybody out there. We'll see you next week. Every Friday afternoon, we stream across all of our social platforms. The best place is offtheball.com, or, of course, on Friday evenings on Off the Ball on News Talk. We'll see you next week. Best of luck.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.